Good morning, guys. Welcome to Wednesday. Life's getting interesting out there with everything going on, so I'm going to talk about that a bit. But if you're new to me, I'm Marshall Burtcher, and I help codependents and survivors of narcissistic abuse reconnect with their value, voice, and vision and rediscover control over their happiness. I just basically help you guys become happy again by helping you exit that codependent paradigm. Today we're going to be talking about what's called taking your power back without shaming yourself. This is going to empower you to move forward, because yesterday we talked about accountability, and today we're going to talk about ownership. So before we get that going, I need to share this out to the community. The community is a safe haven for survivors of narcissistic abuse, people that struggle with people-pleasing and codependency. You are free to join. This is where you'll get more guidance from me, more support from the community, and more witness to see that you're not alone in the journey that you've been going through. So let's get that shared out. How are we out there today, guys? Because I know this is not an easy time. There's a lot of unrest, a lot of uncertainty going on with things. And that's pretty warranted. I mean, with COVID and all that fun stuff going on, why can't... Oh, I see. There we go. Making this work right. So there we go. Alright. So, let me know that you're here just by saying hi, hitting that like or heart button, or saying hi in the comments below. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Guys, I appreciate you being here. So let's get into this. Taking your power back without shaming yourself. So, a lot of times when it comes to therapy, when it comes to confronting ourselves about our situation, about what we're dealing with, what's going on for us, there's a lot of shame. There's shame from other people. There's shame from our programming, so we're shaming ourselves. There's shame that creeps up from the past, judging ourselves. We should have known better. Why didn't I make a different decision when I knew about this? Things like that. This shame is actually part of what keeps you in the cycle of codependent reactionism, codependent coping. And it actually keeps you drawn towards the unhealthy elements, because under shame you think you deserve what you're getting, right? You think that this is something that you've earned. And this isn't true, guys. We haven't earned... Nobody earns abuse. Nobody earns neglect. Period. Okay? A nice, hard, firm boundary on that. Because it's not something we earn. It's something other people choose to do. And that is on them. And this is where the power of this concept of ownership comes in. So let's talk about power for a moment. Power has different elements to it. So in the happiness strategy, one of the support trainings I have for the happiness strategy is called Thrive Strategy. And in Thrive Strategy, we talk a lot about these principles, these elements that make up effective living. Basically skills you didn't get growing up because your parents didn't teach you what you needed to know as a child. So I train you in those skills so that you have them, and that helps you build a really solid, consistent foundation for you to succeed on. So power is built on the premise of consent and personal autonomy. Personal autonomy means I have the right to self-govern. I have the right to establish rules about my yard and what's going to happen in that yard, what's not going to happen in that yard, what I'm going to allow in it, what I want to see in it, how relationships will function for me. So that's the right to self-govern. In that, you'll have two fundamental rights: the right to occupy space, which means you have the right to feel what you feel, want what you want, not like what you don't like what you like, things like that. And you have the second right, which is the right not to care. Now, I just need to reinforce this fact that I'm not saying you should not care. It's the right to acknowledge when you don't care that you don't care. Because empathy isn't always the appropriate response to a situation. There may be a better response, like advocating for your boundary, confronting problems, being direct, or even just leaving the situation. Further, when we have what's called boundaried empathy, we are no longer internalizing other people's feelings and behaviors and consequences. Instead, we're allowing them to have those things and work them out while feeling with them in the experience. All right. So with that fundamental, the second component to power is called ownership. Now, ownership builds on yesterday's training or the training about accountability. It helps you understand where your fundamental boundary is when it comes to desires, feelings, choices, and actions. I use ownership as like the scaffolding, the framework for effective boundary making. You take ownership and you combine it with what's called core values, and suddenly you know what you want and what you don't want, and you know what to say yes and no to, and you know how to confront problems, you know how to confront relationships more effectively, and you know how to say yes and no in a way that aligns you with more of your value, voice, and vision, more of that happiness that you truly be. So ownership has 4 primary components. Now, when we understand these components, we can release our need for shame. We can release the programming around shame and instead embrace the reality that we have a right to grow. Okay? The whole premise of power is based on the concept that we can consent to learn, right? We're not born knowers. We're born explorers. We're born with the ability to discover things. We're extremely good at discovery. We're really bad at automatically knowing something. So we can then, if we accept this as a truth, we can sit there and go, okay, I can let go of shaming myself for the things I didn't know before. Okay? And then this allows you to open up to owning, and I'll go into those 4 principles in a second, owning what's actually yours and releasing what isn't. So let's get into those 4 elements of ownership. So ownership means it's mine, period. It's typically a pretty 100% thing, like it's all mine or not all mine, right? And there's 4 basic things that you have 100% of ownership of 100% of the time, okay? That's your feelings, your desires, your choices, and your actions. Now, you've always owned these from the moment you were, incepted into life. You've owned your choices, actions, feelings, and desires. They have always been yours. They've always shown up in your yard. That's why you have intrinsic, absolute ownership of them, because they've always been within you. Okay? So if you're feeling the feeling, it's yours. If you have the desire, it's yours. You make the choice, it's your choice. You receive the consequence with that choice. You take the action, you receive the consequence of that action. Okay? And when we understand that when we're making a choice and an action, we're also choosing a consequence. We don't get to choose what that consequence is. We just get to choose that we're going to receive it anyway. When we take this kind of relationship with action and choice and consequence, suddenly we become much more decisive about what we're doing because we're calculating the kind of consequence we want to live with, right? This also helps us understand what is ours to be responsible for and what is not ours to be responsible for. So in this instance, if we have Joe and we have Sally, and Sally has a desire for pizza and asks Joe to order a pizza, and Joe says no, whose responsibility is it to order the pizza? Anybody want to make a guess? It's Sally's responsibility because Sally has the desire for a pizza, right? Now, Joe can consent to use his time and space and energy to order a pizza or not. In this instance, he said no. That's him owning his desire to say no and his feelings about ordering a pizza. That created an honest experience for Joe and Sally because they both owned their desires and then took an appropriate action that aligned with their desire. This is how ownership functions. This is also how we can discern what we're accountable for and what we're responsible for and what we're not. This can help us end the crazy of gaslighting. It can help us understand what we're committing to and what we're not, and help us point out and clarify boundaries with others, and help us understand what is another person's responsibility or territory. So it goes something like this. If I feel hurt by Sally's behavior, who's responsible for what in that example? Now you can comment below and let me know. Now, I'll give you a pause, then I'll answer it. But Sally is responsible for regulating her feelings. Or I'm responsible for regulating my feelings. Sally is responsible for her behavior. Okay? Because she did the behavior, I felt the feelings. See how that works? Now, a lot of people get alarmed at this point because then they're like, okay, so anybody can do what they want to me and they don't have to care? Honestly, yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that that you tolerate what they're doing to you, right? It doesn't mean you don't confront what they're doing to you. It doesn't mean that you make a decision whether or not you're going to continue to have that person in your world, right? Because people are going to do what they're going to do anyway. So expecting other people not to do something is not necessarily rational in the light that they're going to do whatever they're going to do. Your job is to be aware of what they're doing, confront it, thus create accountability, and then see how they respond to that confrontation. Because what they do here is what really matters. Because a healthy person, or a person that's interested in your well-being, cares about how you feel, is going to respond with a question or with empathy or with an attempt to understand. But a person that's benefit or transactionally oriented, they want something from you, they'll typically respond with a blame or a resistance or a retort of some sort that then informs you about how they regard your emotional experience about their behavior. That's important, because if you want a healthy, empathically connected relationship where you're cared about and you have safety and play and vulnerability, how that person responds to your confrontation is going to tell you what to expect in the future. This is why ownership is really powerful, because if I'm owning my feeling, I say, hey, Sally, I'm really upset about how you made my cheese pizzas. I asked you not to use anchovies. And she's like, well, you're just too sensitive. Get over it. Then, wow, I have not respected at all by Sally. She just wanted to do whatever she wanted. She didn't care about her request, nor did she care about her integrity, about her commitment, which means I'm not sure I can trust Sally. And if I can't trust Sally, I can't really have a vulnerable relationship with her, can I? I can't have an honest experience with her. I'm gonna have to change the way things work there. Now, let's say I confront Sally over these anchovies on the pizza, and Sally's like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry, I spaced it. I will make you a different pizza. I am sorry." That communicates something very, very different, right? It's like, hey, I care about my commitment, my integrity to you. I care about your happiness with what I've produced, because I want you to get what I committed to giving you. There's some empathy there. There's responsibility and accountability there. That means I can trust her. See, we can trust people that make mistakes and own them, and then change their behavior. Right? Now, ownership doesn't mean I just admit to it. Ownership means I change the behavior too. Okay? Because people can say, well, yeah, I did that, I'm sorry, and then continue to do it. What's that worth? Right? There's no integrity there. They don't care. The lack of empathy in that is just like, okay, I guess that's not important to you. And if it's really important to you and not to them, then you've got to make some decisions about where those boundaries function for you. Further, when you understand what is yours and theirs, you can stop taking responsibility for it, and you can start giving it back. So let's say Sally comes to me and says, you made me feel really upset by not giving me praise for the pizzas. I can say, okay, I understand you feel upset that I wasn't grateful for your pizzas. I hear you, but I'm not, I would approach it in this way. I hear you that you're upset that I didn't express gratitude for it. Now, let's say it's the example where she corrected the pizza, and I'm really sorry for that. I should have appreciated that more. I'll do that differently. And then at a different state, I'll be like, hey, Sally, I want to talk about how you made me responsible for your emotion about the pizzas and the gratitude. That crosses a boundary for me because I didn't make you feel that. You felt that, and I care about how you feel. I would appreciate it if you communicated your feelings in a different way, like saying, I felt disappointed or upset that you didn't express gratitude for the pizzas. That would help me understand where you're coming from better, and then it would keep us clear as to what's going on for us. That's the way I'd approach that. That helps us keep that clarity of boundary, especially with emotions. So if you find yourself blaming other people for what you do or for what you choose or what you feel, then you're making them responsible for what's intrinsically yours. You want to retrieve that from them and say, I take responsibility, radical 100% responsibility for these things. And then I need to understand what my need is and what actions need to happen to help correct the dynamic that's going on so it's more equitable and safe and healthy for you and for them. Remember that me and you order, healthy for me and them. I always come first. You always come first. Okay? All right. Yep, exactly, Laurie. They can use really pretty words. If you're dealing with a truly, like a narcissistic individual or a covert narc or someone who's really crafted in gaslighting you, they'll use all the pretty words. But if their behaviors don't align with their words and they don't have empathy, get the hell out, because you're just going to have hell there. So when we understand this principle of ownership, then we can say, I see I've been putting responsibility for my well-being in them. I've been expecting them to be something their behaviors demonstrate that they truly aren't. Now I need to accept that and retrieve that from them and say, I need to own how I've been seeing them, and then start making a more honest approach to that situation. This allows us to become more and more sober about reality. It crushes the fantasy, and it forces us to confront what we are doing that keeps us stuck in toxic dynamics. Because 100% of the time, codependents give the other person the responsibility for regulating their sense of value. It's called externalized value or external orientation. You have to be really, really mindful of this habit, because it's what's keeping you hooked in the fantasy and hooked in their world. They aren't responsible for your sense of value or worth. You are, because it's intrinsically yours. So when you retrieve your value from someone, you're also retrieving the authority and the responsibility over that value so that you can nurture it within you and set them free from that. By setting them free, you get to see them honestly. You get to approach the behaviors honestly. You get to have a clear and sober experience with that person. So when it comes to desires, the desires are yours. Your job is to advocate for the desire by asking in a direct, clear, and simple way about what you want. When you have feelings, it's about communicating those directly, clearly, and simply in a way that's, direct, clear, and simple. So I feel this when this, or I'm feeling this, could I have this from you? That kind of thing. You're going to make a choice about something. Don't make it based on what you want someone else to be or do, because that's putting you in their yard and you making them responsible over your choice. You make your choice for you and what you need and what you want. You advocate for your boundary by making that choice. And then you communicate the choice. You take action for what's best for you in the situation and what's in agreement, in accordance with the agreements and commitments you've made. This allows you to maintain integrity. This also releases you from shame. Guys, there's no reason to feel bad or shame about your past decisions that you've made through the old paradigm of making other people responsible for you. Instead, now you can say, I understood what I was doing. I can take it back. I can own it. I can then take proactive action that will work well for me. Okay? Because this is how we do it. Because we're innocent. Okay? We're not wrong we're wrong in how we were behaving depending on the context, right? But we're also right in how we were behaving depending on the context. So if I'm dealing with a narcissistic person and I'm fawning, it makes sense to fawn. They're a threat. I didn't know what else I could do, so boom. But now I can take ownership of my fawning and say, I'm fawning. I need to be aware of this. I need to know my signals. I need to know how to regulate it into advocacy. We fawn to advocacy. It puts us into what's called healthy fight, which is advocacy. And then I can deal with it appropriately. I can confront it realistically. And then I can take proactive actions, proactive choices towards my desires. My desires are not them changing, by the way. That's not a desire that's realistic. It's also about them doing something you have no power over. Your desire needs to be, I feel X, I would like to experience X, let's ask them and see what they'll do. Notice desire doesn't reference somebody else being a certain way. It references what you want to experience. This comes back to the model of what, how, who. What do I want? How do I want it? Who aligns with those two things? Who aligns with what and how I want? What I want. Okay? This is how, again, ownership can release us from the experience of shame and from the experience of powerlessness. So give yourself a chance, guys, not to blame yourself. Okay? You did the best you knew how to do, just as you're doing the best you know how to do now. You deserve positive, warm regard or generosity regarding your past choices, actions, desires, and feelings. They made sense for the context you were dealing with and for the understanding you were coming from. But now you can take back your power by retrieving your desires and feelings, the responsibility for your desires, feelings, choices, and actions from others. Taking radical ownership of them, 100% ownership of them, and then beginning to deliberately make choices going forward that would empower you. Now, those choices are going to make you say yes and no to things. That's good because you're becoming healthy. You're becoming differentiated from other people, places, and things. You're able to make the things that need to happen in your world. Okay? So, I try to make this as delicate as possible, but also as clear as possible, because ownership can really trigger shame. It can really trigger, feeling like you're stupid. If that programming shows up in you, on my YouTube channel, I have a shame release and guilt clearing release tools on there. I highly recommend giving those a shot. But two, I would also give yourself permission to let go of the shame. Who would I be if I let go of this shame? Who would I be if I praised and appreciated what I did to get to where I'm at and praised and appreciate what I'm doing now to get to where I want to be? When we approach this from love, we can win. You don't need more shame. You just need to be self-confronting and accountable to yourself. Your shame will not help you. One thing that can help you, disappointment. If I'm disappointed in my choices because I keep choosing the same thing over and over and getting the same result, that's a good signal that I'm not aligning with my own chosen integrity, and now I need to get really honest with myself and confront it and deal straight up. That is where we can win. That is where things need to ground for us. Because if you start getting disappointed in the choices you're making, rather than shameful in them, you're actually moving into more of an advocacy and self-accountability position, so that you can make better choices and actions that are more aligned with what you desire. So I hope this helps you guys out today. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on it. I appreciate you. Stay safe out there. I know we have the COVID-19 crisis going on. If you're a student or a client of mine, we're not going to be affected in that unless something locally here happens that happens to affect me deliberately, because everything we do is online, so there won't be any disruption to those services or elements. But do take care of yourself. Be smart, prepare, but also keep yourself focused. That's what I do with crises. I'm like, we've got a crisis. I keep myself focused on my priorities. I keep myself focused on what I want to be accomplishing, as well as taking precautions and prepared action for possible outcomes. Lori says, I stopped breaking my own heart. Exactly. Instead, what are you doing now? Now that you've stopped breaking your heart, what are you doing instead? I imagine it's probably respecting and standing up for that heart, especially over some of the successes you've had recently through the happiness strategy. So keep kicking butt there. Appreciate you guys. Remember that you're worth knowing, loving, and keeping. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Be safe out there. Bye-bye.